No, you shouldn't eat omega-6 because it's inflammatory. All right, this is really a very outdated and misleading hypothesis. This is a hypothesis that people came up with over 20 years ago, right? And then they blamed grains and all these other foods for inflammation because they were concerned the polyunsaturated fats in them, the omega-6, caused inflammation. Okay. Now, when I say that, what was their basis for this? Well, the basis for this exists that LA could be converted into arachidonic acid. Okay. And keeping in mind a lot of your plants, that is the primary omega-6 polyunsaturated fat in them, right? Particularly in grains and things, a lot of nuts. So that was the idea. And it wasn't that they thought the linoleic acid was inflammatory. It's that the pathway exists for the body to convert it into arachidonic acid. And arachidonic acid has been found in quite a few clinical trials in the metabolic ward to when we consume significant amounts of it, it absolutely can cause an inflammatory response through a number of prostaglandins and things in the body. It has a lot of potential inflammatory pathways, even concerns of insulin resistance, possibly raising bad cholesterol, all this other stuff. Right, a lot of the fears that we have of saturated fat actually come from even arachidonic acid. Right, a lot of the same concerns. Okay, so what's really happened though? What's really happened is that most of these specific plant source omega-6s, when they're looked at both in the lab and the metabolic ward, they're looked at in a variety of studies. Here's what we find. Their intake is usually linked to lower inflammation. Okay? It's usually linked to improved insulin sensitivity. It's usually linked to a better lipid profile. Okay? They're pretty good. They're actually pretty good overall. They're linked to general good health. And even these concerns of ratios of omega-3 to omega-6, most of the leading researchers and dietitians are saying, yeah, this isn't actually a concern. Most people could stand to have more omega-3 in their diet, absolutely. There's a lot of health benefits to that. But the omega-6 isn't that bad in this form. Okay, number one. Number two, well, we'll get over to that in a second. As far as the conversion to arachidonic acid. All right. But when we look at the other in the lab, what happens? When it is given in the lab, what do we see? In significant doses. What happens? Inflammatory markers go down. It actually also seems to slightly enhance insulin sensitivity. Right? It doesn't seem to really deposit much as liver fat. But it improves insulin sensitivity. That's one of the things that's noted. It improves insulin sensitivity and it speeds up fat oxidation. Okay? It is one of the fats that our body will readily burn for fuel. Because that's not normally the case. Usually our preferred fuel is glucose, but we find that certain chains of fatty acids, and there's a pretty wide variety of how much this is true, literally different types of polyunsaturated, different sources, monounsaturated, saturated, have all been studied pretty in depth in the lab to see how much on a calorie for calorie basis they speed up fat oxidation, which is fat burning. This one's on the higher end, right? It is right there next to some of the omega-3 fats. Maybe not quite as good as they are, but pretty dang close in terms of its ability to speed up fat oxidation. Okay, so it makes the body burn fat. By the way, saturated fats tend to be the worst at this. We don't like to use them as fuel. We just don't. We would much prefer to store them, and we store them efficiently. And it's not to say that all fats can't be stored as body fat somewhat efficiently, but there is an order of priority and ability to do so. Okay, these don't store as well. They tend to speed up fat burning. And again, they improve insulin sensitivity. This is a good thing. All right, here's the kicker. We find that humans don't really turn it into arachidonic acid that effectively. We have the ability, but it's very low. And we seem to only really do it on an as-needed basis, meaning because we need a little bit of arachidonic acid, there's a very small amount we have to have for health and some functions. So we need to be clear there. We don't need much of it. It's a very small amount. we do seem to be able to get enough from this if we're eating significant amounts of these other omega-6s. We can convert it, but it converts at a very low rate. So much so that, again, high intakes of this other plant-based omega-6 tend to lower inflammatory markers. Okay, because they outweigh any inflammation caused by the arachidonic acid, the small amount of conversion. But it turns out we just don't convert it that much, unlike some other animals. Okay, so this inflammation is mythical. It's not really real. But here's the thing. The arachidonic acid inflammation is real to some extent. But here's the problem. All the people who are terrified of the omega-6 because of this arachidonic, if they even know why, other than, oh, it's just bad, it's inflammatory. No, it's because of the arachidonic acid. The same people, when you ask them, okay, so but you're worried about the arachidonic acid, well, where does that occur in nature? Again, these are usually low-carb people who love fatty meat and eggs. That's where the arachidonic acid is found. That's where we get it. Eggs are pretty high. A lot of fatty meats are. Okay. It is one of the primary omega-6 fats found in animals. So there's different polyunsaturated fats, right? There's different omega-3s, there's different omega-6s. So the one that causes the real inflammation, the highest sources of it in nature, are the animal fats. Okay, that's where it's found. So the same people who are screaming about it and scared of it are literally eating the foods that have it. And they're scared of other foods because they're scared a pathway exists to where your body can make the thing they're afraid of that causes inflammation. So instead, while vilifying it, not touching those plant ones, they're just going to eat it directly in large amounts. Keeping in mind, this is why there's a lot of complexity behind eating certain foods and their correlation with certain disease. It's not just the saturated fat that is a factor, which is a big factor. A lot of the foods that are high in saturated fat are also high in arachidonic acid. Right? You're getting both of these. Again, does anyone think this is a problem? And again, people, when you say this, they're so ignorant, they'll jump up. Oh, Ansel Keys and dietary cholesterol. We're not talking about dietary cholesterol. That is not part of this topic at all. We're talking about specific fatty acids, not cholesterol. Completely different topic. But here's the thing. Yeah, they will just eat the thing directly that they're terrified of their body making. They'll just eat it in its highest bioavailable form found in nature without giving it a second thought.